Hello and welcome to Express on this Thursday, July the 5th. I'm Todd Vanderheyden.
And I'm Amanda Blitz. Well, the world's worst nuclear crisis in 25 years was preventable. That's according to a final report into last year's disaster in Japan. The report from an expert panel concluded that the crisis could have been avoided. It said that collusion, ignorance, and arrogance among the government and nuclear regulators caused the disaster. This came just after Japan put its first nuclear reactor back online since last year's devastating earthquake and tsunami.
A very damning indictment. And for more on this story, we are joined from London, Ontario by Erika Simpson. She is an associate professor of international relations at Western University and has written extensively on issues relating to nuclear science, nuclear weapons. So, Erika, who is to blame for not ensuring the system would be able to sustain a major earthquake like we saw in Japan last year?
Well, the finger's being pointed at humans, actually. They're saying that humans are responsible for building nuclear reactors on seismic cracks, and that actually the scientists, the nuclear advisors, and even the government are at fault for building all these reactors in Japan. There's 21 aging reactors that they were thinking about refurbishing, and it looks like they won't be able to do that now because this report from the legislature in Japan, from the Diet, has basically recommended after they interviewed 1,100 people, 900 hours of interviews, and concluded that this was a fault due to human error, where they built reactors that could not withstand an earthquake. So even if there had not been a tsunami, this is the important part, even if there had not been a tsunami, the earthquake would have caused cracks and the coolant to leak and so on. So they have all these other reactors that they have to worry about too.
So what changes do you think will be made because of this report? I mean, what does this mean for the future of nuclear power, specifically for Japan?
Well, for Japan, it has huge implications because 30% of their energy comes from electricity that is created by nuclear reactors. So they're going to have to look for other alternative sources, obviously oil and natural gas and so on. But it also has implications worldwide for the nuclear industry because it means that we have to think outside the box. We have to be prepared for larger scale crises. And the Japanese were not ready for this crisis. They built reactors that could not withstand the worst case scenario. And so the lesson for us, for the nuclear industry in China and in the United States, is that they have to be better prepared for huge scale crises that we can't even imagine.
You know, Japan often has this reputation of being very meticulous, very careful with how they do things. When you look at this report saying that this crisis was man-made, it was preventable, and it happened in Japan, what does that say about other countries that have nuclear reactors as well?
Well, that's a good question. The Chinese are building more nuclear reactors. They have 40 planned right now, and obviously in the United States, they are also on the nuclear path. So the lesson for the rest of the world is to think about alternative sources and also to think about crisis management, because we are perhaps not ready. We have to think outside the box about what could possibly happen. That doesn't mean an earthquake is going to strike Canada and that we will run a risk somehow that way, but the Darlington reactors in Pickering and also the Bruce reactor in close to Lake Huron, we need to think about alternatives. We also have to think about the possibility of what we're going to do with the nuclear waste. Should we build an underground depository, which is being talked about, off the shore of Lake Huron, and would that last 100,000 years? We can't predict. We can't see into the future, and so there's huge risks that we need to be prepared for, and that's the big lesson for the world of this report.
You know, this report comes out on the heels of one reactor at the Daiichi Fukushima plant going online. So do you think the Japanese people will tolerate the government, sticking with their nuclear program?
Well, they just had a recent poll that was done by a media organization, and they said 70% of the Japanese would like to get completely out of nuclear. The Germans have decided to go offline. They've decided to completely get rid of their nuclear reactors. It's hard to say what the Japanese will do because they're so reliant right now on nuclear reactors, but as you mentioned, they're resilient, they're technologically focused, and perhaps they'll build some new kind of energy instrument that we can all profit from.
Erika, you talked about the Germans, and we know that this incident and Chernobyl before, it led to a certain amount of reassessment in the world in terms of nuclear energy, the use of it, looking for alternatives. What do you think the lessons are for us in Canada about this report?
Well, Quebec is thinking about refurbishing one of its reactors. That they're debating that, and they're not certain. We are going ahead with refurbishing the Pickering reactors, and then New Brunswick is also debating this. So for Canada, it's hard to say what to do because we sell nuclear reactors overseas to Argentina. We've sold them to South Korea. The nuclear industry is very gung-ho about selling more nuclear reactors overseas. So the Canadian people have to ask themselves, we're one of the largest producers of uranium in the world, whether we want to continue on in the nuclear industry or not. And the risks are evident to see given not just this report, but the Carnegie Institute for Peace has come out as well with a report criticizing the Japanese government and arguing that there was a collusion there of the electrical power industry and the government, and that we and everyone needs to rethink the future in terms of nuclear energy.
Erika Simpson with Western University in London, Ontario. Thanks so much, Erika.
You're welcome.